Good evening, everybody. I'd like to thank Dr. Dimmick and Dr. Sosa for the privilege and opportunity to participate in this amazing panel. I'm really sorry for not being there in person with you. I'm always so inspired and energized by the SAGES meeting and by being around SAGES people, seeing the amazing work that's being done, which I think is very relevant when we're talking about antidotes to burnout. I have no relevant disclosures pertaining to the content of this presentation. I will disclose, however, that quite glad that the title of this talk focuses on challenges and not solutions. But I am looking forward to hearing and learning from other people's experiences, hopefully in the discussion. Now, and this is a slide that we're all fairly familiar with. This is our own from our own province in Quebec. And of course, we've all been through a lot in the past 18 months. It's not over yet. This is our hospitalization for COVID. And you can see we were really hit hard at the beginning. The first wave having one of the highest per capita death rates in the world. And at the beginning, of course, we all remember everything was in flux. Everyone was hyper-focused on running the operating room in the hospital. We were all learning about this new disease in warp speed, focused on really trying to keep our staff and our patients safe. It was very adrenaline fueled, and we were in rapid action mindset. And then as time has gone on and we've been navigating additional waves and now entering the fourth wave, and things have never really gotten back to normal. And we just continue to miss our regular lives. We've all continued to be more isolated. We're separated from each other and from our teams, in many cases our families, our students. And it's not just at work. Clearly this feeling, it permeates throughout all of aspects of life. And the world outside work is very difficult and stressful to live in right now. The world online is also difficult. Politics, even weather, they all contribute to this sense of constant worry and anxiety. And it is tough to find the stamina to lead and be a role model when you are exhausted and burned out yourself. At this point in the pandemic, many people are struggling with what's been called the emotional long haul of the pandemic. What Adam Grant, the organizational psychologist at Wharton and New York Times writer, he calls this languishing. So it's not burnout, it's not depression, it's something in between, and really just a sense of stagnation and emptiness. And as Adam Grant says, he says it feels as if you're muddling through your days, looking at your life through a foggy windshield. Here's an example of a poor coping strategy that I admit I unfortunately adopted this year and have since tried hard to shed. And maybe it's also a sign of not having small children anymore at home or pets that need me when I come home from work. But many days I just came home and really all I could do, and my husband was like this too, was lie on the sofa and mindlessly scroll through Facebook, watching clips of Seinfeld or Friends, not even the full episodes. And the more I watched, the more, of course, it finds for you to watch. And you got into this sort of vortex until it was time for bed. So even if we're not fully burned out, I think, and many of us are, of course, I think we've all experienced this sense of languishing, this kind of hard to find a motivation, a lack of excitement, and lack of things to look forward to. Now, burnout itself, of course, was a serious issue before the pandemic, and it's been exacerbated in many cases by it, particularly for nursing colleagues, which is resulting in an exodus of highly trained, experienced people leaving the workforce. I thought this was an issue specific to us in a way, but this was an article yesterday, excuse me, in the New York Times. So this is clearly an issue throughout North America, and it worsens the situation for the people who remain. This quote, "We're exhausted both physically and emotionally." Ms. O'Brien said, choking back tears, I think sums up what burnout is like very well. So what can we do as leaders to energize ourselves and our teams, really help cope help them cope when we're feeling somewhat blah ourselves, even if not fully burned out, but really not having difficulty finding that energy. As surgeons, teachers, and leaders, of course, it starts with the fact that we're role models, and we're being watched by everyone, and people get their cues from our behavior, and clearly we set the tone. So the first thing is we need to continue to develop that self-awareness of our own feelings, so we can start by managing them appropriately, recognizing when we are feeling tired and burned out, and so that we don't just exhibit our own anxiety and our own tension as the predominant behavior. But of course, not exhibiting tension or anxiety is different than just repressing it and sucking it up. And that's not what I'm trying to say. I think that we really start by setting a good example for everyone. It starts by taking care of ourselves when we recognize those feelings of exhaustion or burnout in ourselves. It starts with perhaps sharing the impact of the pandemic on us personally with our teams, to normalize the fact that this is something universal feelings, being compassionate to others, but also being compassionate to ourselves, and really taking care of ourselves. And it starts with taking care of ourselves. And I think that in the surgical culture, we have to fight that idea that taking care of ourselves, it's not a luxury, it's not a weakness, it's not being lazy, it's not a personal failing. It's about self-preservation and having the energy to keep going yourselves in the way that people need us to keep going, and to be a source of energy to other people as well. Things like exercise for me are quite important. On the weekends, if you have more time, and we like to bike or run. My husband set up this fancy home gym for himself in the basement. And even just days that are really busy, if I can just find the time for 30 minutes to do a run around the block a couple times, or take a walk with friends, makes a big difference for me. Healthy food as well, and many people used those companies that can help with food planning and preparation, because that got to be quite it was hard to find the enthusiasm to continue to plan meals. Sleep, as we all know, also extremely important for recharging the batteries. Having people to talk to and commiserate with, not just vent, but people that understand the situation, can give you advice. It's important to set limits. As a leader, do we really need that another Zoom meeting for this? Can if we do, can it be shorter and much more focused, so we protect our teams from that? And very important to take a break, a real vacation. Take a vacation. Taking vacations, I think, is really important, and a vacation that's of a sufficient length to be able to disconnect from work. We're very lucky, of course, and we have a place to go at a lake about an hour and a half north of the city, and having that place really helped break the monotony of all those weeks where every day just flowed into the next day. And I just came back from vacation about a week ago, and I'm still feeling the glow of that vacation. It was a 2-week vacation. The first week I was still completely wired up, and even biking or running or trying to read, I couldn't get thoughts of many things at work and things I had to do out of my mind. But that second week, I was finally able to kind of let go, and convince myself that all that stuff would be there for me when I got back, and it was. So being in nature, cooking, barbecuing, reading, and actually now being able to have people over for a meal, as long as we can for that, we're all very helpful. Because really we need to be that source of energy and optimism for other people and for ourselves, helping to put things in context, helping people find the good and the positive side of things, providing stability, reminding people of successes, both in the pandemic and before the pandemic, and continuing to recognize and acknowledge people's efforts and their success, being an advocate for the team, making sure we're protecting them, and always trying to cultivate a sense of community. And of course, that can be very difficult when we can't physically be together, and we've had to think of new ways. Most of them have to do with Zoom. This is an example of what we did for our SAGES executive retreat, which is an annual meeting, a day and a half. And it tends to be at the president's home base, or it has been over, pre-pandemic. And I was really looking forward to having everyone to Montreal. I love the city, and maybe even up to the cottage. But of course, that wasn't possible. So we did have our Zoom retreat, and it was very, very useful and very good. And as just a little fun part, we made waffles together with our families over Zoom. And we got cute little SAGES branded waffle makers, and of course, maple syrup from Canada. Now, even when we are compassionate towards ourselves and towards others in the context of burnout and languishing, we still have to continue to make progress at work. We can't just disconnect completely. And maybe the most important way to get re-energized, besides making waffles and taking vacation, is to remember and remind others why we're in these roles in the first place. So whenever I feel burnt out by the daily tasks that we know are impossible to accomplish, and even before COVID, for me, just reconnecting with patients, doing clinical work, clinic, OR, with the residents and the fellows and our students is usually, I find, very, very energizing. And it's also, I think, it's been helpful to continue to focus on non-pandemic projects. At SAGES, these are priority projects for me, like our DEI initiatives, video-based assessment projects, the master's curriculum projects, the projects going on in AI and data science, and all the other amazing things that this society does. And at home, this was ensuring that we did our usual events in our department, like our resident graduations, visiting professors, our research days, recognizing teaching and research excellence and leadership with our awards. Of course, these were virtual, but they went really well, and we're getting better at it. And there were definitely advantages in attendance and participation in having things virtual. We continue to focus on what's going to be in the post-pandemic world, and how do we build on what we've learned through COVID, new structures and processes that we put in place, new research collaborations, new teaching methods, telehealth methods, and maybe even hybrid meetings as we're starting to develop here. And even small progress and small steps forward reinforce our common sense of purpose and our connection to each other. So as a Canadian, we like to apologize a lot. So again, I'm really sorry to not be able to be with you today in person, and to gain inspiration from you in person. But it's wonderful to be able to participate, and one way or another, in person, virtual or hybrid. We'll be doing it all again in a little over 6 months, hopefully in Denver. So thank you, and look forward to discussion.